Hello, everyone. This is Bradley Nishiura and Patrick Hugh from Prospect High School. Today, we will dive into a topic that has persisted for decades and continues to shape societies around the world: the war on drugs.
And we will also talk about the divide between the societal problems, which are leaking into politics as well.
Okay, for this first topic, which is the war on drugs, we'll explore first the history, and then the prevalence in present day society, and discuss how rehabilitation efforts can offer a alternative approach to the war on drugs.
Yo, thanks, Bradley. It's crucial that we shed light on this issue as it affects millions globally, and to really affirm like a actual solution to like the drug related
The
problem.
issue, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start by looking at the history. Uh, as it stands, the war on drugs gained significant momentum during the late 20th century, particularly in the United States, right? In 1971, Richard Nixon declared drug abuse to be public enemy number one. Then he officially launched the war on drugs.
What else has made the movement itself like grow along the years?
Well, specifically like the crack epidemic starting around 1980 really took off the war of drugs, right? Or let the war of drugs take off.
Mm-hmm.
So this was during the Reagan administration, right? So Reagan and his wife pushed for several policies and campaigns to try and fight this epidemic, which led to wide like kind of exposure for the war on drugs, since this was a very prominent epidemic. But in general, this approach has had several severe consequences. According to a Vera.org article, 15 million drug arrests are made every year, and with many coming from drug law violations or cannabis offenses, meaning they're not necessarily violent, right? And then it also disproportionately targets poor communities and leads to mass incarceration and just a perpetuating cycle of poverty.
Wait, so what you're saying is Nixon and kind of like more Reagan as well was targeting the poor communities in order to stop drugs and let some rich people like let them go because they targeted the more poor people, right? No?
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe they didn't necessarily let rich people go, but since it's more difficult to pursue offenses against rich people or persecution, it's more logical that it targeted poorer communities, especially since they put so much emphasis on persecution rather than any efforts of like trying to actually fix the mindset of drug abusers.
Because wait, I read about this before in like right in Vera.com. I saw like a assistant to the president for domestic affair under President Richard Nixon, John Erkman. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
He said, in quotes, "You want to know what this war on drugs was really about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies: the anti-war left and black people." You understand what I'm saying? Those are quotes. And then he also said, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and the criminalization, both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about drugs? Of course we did."
Right.
It's like, to me, that seems like kind of an abusement of power from like the higher ups. So I was
Right.
wondering about it.
Yeah, the war on drugs hasn't always been like a good faith movement. It's largely disadvantaged like marginalized communities namely black people, and also and it has been used for political purposes, right? So it kind of enabled the persecution of anti-war activists, right? Because they were kind of seen as hippies. They might be
Oh yeah, 'cause,
right
like,
involved
Vietnam
in drugs.
was occurring during this time.
Yeah,
Content
right. And this was like during a time where like these types of people
Yeah, the
tended to
peace.
use they the stereotype was like they were hippies, right?
And
They
the
tended
civil
to use
rights
drugs.
and such.
Right, and the war on drugs has kind of been like used as a tool to like persecute these people
Yeah, but
for political
Right.
purposes.
drugs are, of course, a villain, but like
Yeah, they're not
they
good.
had such a like their intent of it. They didn't want to get rid of drugs. They wanted
Yeah.
to like make certain races get targeted by.
Yeah, and certain
Like-
groups, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So the war on drugs has historically not been the most good faith movement, despite like its end goal being supposedly noble, right? But fast forward to present day, the war on drugs is still ongoing.
Oh, so how has it like evolved and like the impact of the communities itself?
Well, despite decades of effort, it hasn't really been successful in coming close to achieving its goals, right? Instead of seeing a decrease in drug use, we've seen a rise in drug-related violence and an increase of overdose deaths, continued marginalization of certain groups like you mentioned, Black people, and certain other like minority races. And then the criminalization of drug users often like just exacerbates the issue and hinders the implementation of effective harm reduction strategies.
Is that so? Okay. Well, so is there any ways we can prevent such, like rehabilitation or?
Yeah, I believe rehabilitation is a really good option we have to combat this movement, right? Because even internationally, like just a strictly judicial approach to the war on drugs hasn't really been effective. Because according to an article or reports from Harm Reduction International,
Mm-hmm.
the U.S. and U.K. have used a collective almost of $1 billion on global drug policies, right?
$1 billion?
Yeah. More and more money has been spent on like narcotic enforcement than even school feeding projects and labor rights, right? And
But that's actually crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Efforts have still remained unsuccessful despite all this funding. So, yeah, moving back to rehabilitation, I think it could really be useful in combating drug abuse, right? So rather than focusing solely on punishment,
Mhm.
we could prioritize programs that address the underlying issues leading to substance abuse, like mental health support, education, access to treatment facilities.
Okay. Now thinking about it though, like that's for more of a perfect world in that, and I do believe that rehabilitation is the best solution if it were to be a perfect world. But I just think that it wouldn't work due to the fact that the sheer price of rehabilitation and how it would take part in national debt or like the actual taxpayers, because at the end of the day, taxpayers don't really want to pay for something they don't see value towards.
That's an excellent point, right? So many taxpayers aren't particularly concerned with the war on drugs, right? Because it hasn't been like a popular movement in the sense that people want to rally behind it, because it's largely seen as failed. Like it's efforts have been seen as kind of like futile in this area. But the thing about like rehabilitation, so according to an article by let's see, Seattle Times, there have been kind of efforts that in certain cities like Seattle, where instead of moving these drug abuse convicts to prisons, they're moving them to rehabilitation facilities. And even though this can be expensive. Many of them actually do qualify for Medicaid, so they can so like efforts can be sponsored by the government through Medicaid because these people are qualified, but they're not exactly like aware of it. So it doesn't have to be like out of like a certain fund. It's already out of a pre-existing fund that just gets put to use instead of like trying to persecute these people.
My brother, I read about Seattle Times. I also read a part where it said, I remember it saying, oh yeah, here, that even if like someone went to like rehab for 8 times before it stuck, like I feel like it takes a while before it actually sticks into the people. That's the thing. And also another thing I read about is, or rather like thought about, was how rehabilitation, it can be like, you know how at school people would know, hey, this is like a class, I can do it for my self benefit, but like I just don't want to, you know.
Right.
And like those self-destructive people who like know it's bad but still do it because, you know, that slight, what is it, dopamine, whatever, like they're like,
Yeah,
I don't want to do something, but like how do you solve that?
right. So they know they're not supposed to do it. Like in school, they know they're not supposed to skip class, but they still do it despite like reinforcement to not do it. So I think that that's a great point, but I do believe that this is a generally effective solution, even though it may not be like completely effective. I still believe it's the best we have. So it may not be completely successful in working every time, but I think it's generally just more beneficial than trying to persecute these people. And it's important to recognize that addiction is like a complex matter, right? It's rooted in social and economic factors, and kind of just an approach where we just persecute these people, or kind of just perpetuates a cycle of incarceration and doesn't really address the root causes of these issues, right? Rehabilitation tries to break the cycle by like offering support and treatment to these individuals, and then trying to reintegrate them into society as like productive members.
I also see it as like a like importance to take in the fact that substances like shouldn't be in the public eye at all, and there should be an advocacy, or like a spread to change the fact that, hey, this is not a good substance for you. You are an adult. You should know this is bad for you, and that you should be in your own like private domain while in consumption of drugs. Like, but that's how I see it.
Well, there have been efforts to kind of like campaign against drugs, right? And this historically hasn't seen much like benefit to society, right? Because like the example we said before with Reagan on the crack epidemic, he and his wife definitely did lead many campaigns to where they kind of appeal to the broader society to say kind of oh, this stuff is bad, you know, you shouldn't be doing it, it's our number one priority to stop it. And it still hasn't really seen much effect to where like cases go down, like deaths by overdose go down. But yeah, and then also like kind of just like pushing it away from the public eye, I don't think is the best method of treating it either, because it's still going to go on despite whether or not people know about it.
You
right?
can never like get rid of drugs now, because they're such an important part of the economy, like medical, marijuana, or like
especially in other countries, right? Like their economies may rely on drug trade despite like its negative effects for the society as a whole.
Yeah, because like you're kind of taking the right to do a drug, like even if you know it's illegal, if you know it's bad, it's still a right people should have to do as an adult. That is a consenting adult.
Hmm. Well, also, a point that I have is Portugal is a great example of how rehabilitation has been used to like, or more lenient policies have been used to treat drugs, like because they have a more
Oh, really?
they instead of emphasizing on persecuting
Mm-hmm.
drug abusers, they've actually decriminalized the possession and use of small quantities of drugs in 2001.
Oh, really?
So yeah, according to an article by Knowledge at Wharton, instead of facing criminal charges, individuals are directed to support services. So like kind of like
Mm-hmm.
integrating that point of rehabilitation. So they include treatment and self harm reduction programs.
Mm-hmm.
And then this shift has actually resulted in lower rates of drug related deaths and HIV transmission, which kind of demonstrates the effectiveness of a health focused approach.
Wait, so you're telling me that rehabilitation to this degree is actually effective?
Yeah. So yeah, it's seen success in Portugal and it's also seen success in Seattle. All right. So moving on to our next topic, the partisan legal divide.
Okay, wait. So, haven't you noticed how like socially and politically divided America and Americans have been in recent years?
Yeah, it's become very evident with the rise of extreme political ideologies and the polarization of the public. It feels like people are living in two completely different worlds.
I mean, just looking at the way people are consuming information, the media seems to have like it seems to fragment the world and make everyone seem like they're in their own world like bubble, and it's not the same as it used to, like having a conversation and such. Like what I truly believe is like in the 1820s, you know how like the true main parties like the Democratic Republican and Democratic Party itself, it seemed as if like the opposition of each other, how the competition between them led to uh more of a growth in difference between people and
Like disparity.
disparity, yes. And like with the controversial president of Andrew Jackson, it allowed for like more people, like you know how they formed, like you know how some propaganda was like, oh, Andrew Jackson was a tyrant and such.
Mm.
Like that was something I'm thinking about. And in Senate.gov, competitive competitiveness of the parties and fighting for control, especially with like Watergate. You know how like in the 20th century, Watergate, the leaks got
Right.
in, and then
Right.
like and it showed like people's agendas trying to have control rather than for the country itself, and the people stopped having actual faith into the country.
Right. It's interesting how the dynamic of the partisan system has evolved over the years, right? Right. Like going into the late 20th century, but what does it look like in present day, and like how does the advancing of technology change the dynamic of the partisan system?
Well, what I believe now is social media being a catalyst and amplifying everything to where people are like quick to share their opinions without really engaging into like thoughtful discussions and insight for others, and people just rather care about like getting their clicks and getting the actual media attention rather than trying to understand the other side. And one of this is shown in AP News where, in quotes, nearly three-quarters of U.S. adults say that news media is increasing political polarization in this country, and under half say that they have little to no trust in the media's ability to report the news fairly and accurately, according to the new survey of Associate Press Nork Center for Public Affairs Research and Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights. So what I see in this is, first of all, it's a news source, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like they want to get clicks itself, but it's like a survey saying that people don't really they don't believe in what the government says because they don't, from what I know, they don't think of the well-being of the country, and it could be evident that people rather talk about not liking the other side rather than how they'll actually contribute. And it's disheartening to see how divisive politics as well as how like the two-party system seems to encourage this extreme positions, because it's either win or lose, no middle ground. Because if someone's elected, it's not like a party loses. It's more of, well, better luck next year. Looks like I'll try to run again, but the other party, hey, they're going to do their best. We have our own views of how things will get done.
Right. It's less about like actually trying to better the country, and it's more shifted towards like kind of the competition between the parties, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's becoming increasingly difficult to find politicians who are willing to work across the aisle to find like common ground to truly help the country.
Yeah, and that is true. It's not just about the difference, like the different policy preferences. It's about the fundamental differences in the value of the worldviews. And until we can bridge the gap and find a way to understand each other, the division is most likely to keep on going more and more, divide more and more, that gap more and more.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder if there's a way to like encourage more civil discourse. Maybe if we can focus on promoting empathy and understanding, we can start to like break down some of these barriers.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point and a good start as well, because people / individuals, like, they need to start engaging with respect in the conversations and try to understand. You can disagree, but you can also understand, and maybe like the best thing we can do is foster an environment that can try to be more inclusive, yes, inclusive, and like try to hear other people's like views rather than like pushing agendas. And I think like when the January 6th thing fully occurred, Trump like pushed people to go to like he was like, hey, people, you should march to the Capitol and stand for what is right. And people took that as widespread anger and more of citizens wanting to like kill people like in the Capitol, and like riots occurred, and little trust in people had towards a party was clearly evident.
Right. So yeah, I think this change from like a more divided system to a more cohesive and better for the nation system would not be easy, but I think it's definitely essential for the health of our democracy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to find a way to come together as a nation, like set our differences aside and work towards common goals.
Of course. And I agree with that. And hopefully the future would leave us like to an era of less extreme division and build more united and inclusive society, because clearly right now what we can do is hopefully like elect officials that are more like towards a middle ground of it, and maybe change the people's mindset, as right now they're like fully not together. We are half a country.
Right. All right. Well, thank you everyone listening for tuning in. I hope you'll consider the points we've made on this podcast and conduct your own research about these topics. But for now, that's all.
Make sure you're not biased.
Yeah.